Alright, so Merry Christmas. Welcome to another video here on Patreon. And no, this is not a Christmas story. My childhood, I had a good childhood, nothing really to complain about, but I have no real Christmas stories. It was all standard issue. My sister and I got up early. My parents pretty much looked hungover. We did our thing. They went back to sleep, and we spent the rest of the day playing with our toys. It was really not one event that happened during Christmas that was noteworthy. So I figured today would be a good day to tell a couple of stories about how my brother and I, my brother from another mother, how we pretty much both abandoned, we each abandoned the other one in times of crisis. Alright, so the first story. My brother and I we grew up in the 80s, okay, back when you could actually go and do things and be relatively, left alone and be safe. And there was a canal, I don't know, 4 miles, 3-4 miles down the road, something like that. And we'd bike up to this canal, spend the day under the bridge fishing. Now, during this particular period of time, what we used to catch are called Oscars. If you know anything about freshwater fish, and you go to the fish store and you want to put fish in your tank, you'll see cichlids, or sometimes you'll see Oscars, or South American fish. Or South African too. I think they're from both areas. But the point is that with the influx of the Latin community down south during this time, they became pretty popular in the pet stores, and then people would flush them down the toilets or let them go in the canals and the lakes. And they're actually in the piranha family, so they would take over everything. They would eat all the baby brim, eat all the baby bass, and then all you'd catch are these big, fat, aggressive cichlids and Oscars. So we'd go down, we'd go down to the canal, and we'd spend the entire day with the boombox and the batteries and listening to the radio and fishing. And on the other side of the canal, there was the skating rink, which involves the next story. But behind the skating rink, there was a shopping plaza, and the main thing in the shopping plaza was Zayres. If you don't know what a Zayres is like, it's like a Kmart, one of the first type of Walmarts. I don't know if Zayres is still around. Probably not. So, well, we'd get there early in the morning, and usually after about a couple hours, my brother would get kind of bored, and we'd want some snacks, some Coke, some snacks. So, he'd go to the Zayres, come back about a half hour later, chips, snacks, cookies, more bread, because we'd use bread for bait for the fish. Alright, cool. So, I didn't know what was going on. I guess at this age, I'm probably about 11 or 12, and he's probably about 13 or 14. We couldn't drive, he couldn't drive yet, because obviously if we could drive, we wouldn't be riding our bikes. So, this one day, we're fishing, and he says, hey, I'm going to go to the Zayres. And he looks at me, he says, if I'm not back in 2 hours, I got caught shoplifting. I'm like, yeah, okay. So he goes, he takes off. Half hour goes by. An hour goes by. 2 hours go by. About 2.5 hours later, from way on the other end, I see Gene walking. He's walking with his bike. He's not riding his bike. And that's his dad next to him. This dumbass got busted shoplifting at the Zayres. He put a knife in his sock, okay? And I believe, he can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the stupidity of his move was why he got stuck, why he got caught putting it in his sock was because he took it out of the package. I believe this is the story. My memory ain't great, so if I'm wrong, he can come on and correct me. But I believe the reason he got caught is because this dumbass, because he wanted a fishing knife, right? So he took the knife out of the package and then puts the knife in his sock. And so he's getting ready to walk out of the Zayres, and this big old security guard just come from behind him and be like, you got something in your sock, son? Or something to that effect. I wasn't there. But, so here he comes walking, solid 2.5 hours later, and he is just, the shoulders are slumped, and he's just pushing his bike, and his dad's behind him, and you can tell his dad is just like, he's ready to freaking go. And I'm like, I just knew. I just looking off in the distance. I'm like, that son of a bitch. He's been stealing all this shit. And sure enough, his dumbass had been stealing all the cokes, stealing the cookies, and he'd been stealing lures and hooks and fishing tackle. I didn't even know it. I thought he was just being a good brother and buying all this shit. And he wasn't. He was stealing it all. So they finally get all the way up to me, and his dad's in the car. And they were kind of like, hey, I'm in trouble. I'm grounded for like a month. We're going to go home. You want to put your bike in the car? And my dad would give us a ride home. And Gene's like, come on, let's go. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm going to stay here and fish. I totally abandoned his ass. He had to go by himself with his dad, put his bike in the car, and who the hell knows what happened after that. Probably wasn't real pleasant, but I abandoned his ass. I was like, no, I want nothing to do with that. I'm going to stay here and fish. Y'all have a nice day. And I remember like it was yesterday. I remember them walking away, and I just kind of remember that feeling of like, I think I'm going to be under this bridge for the next month by myself because my brother ain't going to be here. So that's the first story, but then he kind of got me back. So a few years later down the road, this is obviously when we could drive, we would go to the skating rink on Friday or Saturday nights from time to time. And at this point, Gene is probably 16, just being able to drive, so I'm probably like 13 years old. And that's just the age when my parents were letting me get out of the house. So, well, my dad would normally pick us up, right? You know, 11:30, 12 o'clock. He'd drive, skating rink was only a few miles down the road. He'd wait in the parking lot, we'd come out, he'd drive us home. Because Gene lived on the same block. He only lived like, 4 houses away. So, well, this was one of the times where it was finally Gene could drive. So, we're driving. So Gene was going to bring me home. So I told my mom, I said, hey, because Dad was at work, make sure Dad knows he doesn't have to pick us up. Gene's driving. Okay, all right, I'll let him know. No problem, right? Well, my dad got there about 11:30 to pick us up. We had left the skating rink about 11:20. We had left about 10 minutes later, or 10 minutes earlier. So, we get home. We're parked outside my house. My dad's car is not there. I'm like, I hope my mom told him. And my mom's in the house asleep. I know it because she goes to bed early. So we're sitting there and we're yapping, we're talking. 11:45, 12, 12:15. Skating rink closes at 12, right? And we would normally get out, we would walk out between 11:30 and 11:45. So it's 12:15, 12:30, my dad, you hear him from blocks away, you hear his tires. And we're like, oh shit. And he pulls up and we're just standing there like, what? And he jumps out of the car, slams the door. He says, Gene, go home. Eric, your ass is mine. Gene, just like I kind of did, this was pretty much Gene's reaction.
Screw you guys, I'm going home.
Exactly. Okay, so Gene takes off running home. I run I run through the fence, I leave the fence open, I run in the house, and I'm yelling, Mom, 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 because I had to make sure that I woke her up before my dad got to me so that she could tell him that it was her mistake because she was the one that was supposed to tell my dad to not pick me up. And she never told him. So he's sitting in the skating rink parking lot on a Friday night waiting for Gene and I for an hour, just getting pissed off and watching all the other kids come out and all the kids come out. And then finally the guys come out and they close and they lock up and he's like, where the hell are Eric and Gene? So he drives home and Gene and I are just basically standing outside with a Coke and a smile. Like, hey, how you doing? So he waited his ass in the car for an hour before he finally drove back home. And so I did. I ran as I'm yelling and screaming for my mom, running in the house, and she jumps up. What? I'm like, tell him. Gene drove us home. You were supposed to tell him. And she was like, oh, Ronnie, it was my fault. I forgot to tell you. Well, and then of course my dad was still obviously agitated and upset, but I didn't get in any trouble. But so both times in our most desperate, darkest time of need, I abandoned my brother and he abandoned me, so I suppose it's even. So, Merry Christmas, everybody. That was just a beautifully happy, uplifting story. Oh, crap. All right, that was enough for today. That one obviously has nothing to do with light work, with the exception of the fact that sometimes, how can I twist this into a positive lesson? Hold on, give me a second, all right? Sometimes, even though somebody abandons you in your time of need, that doesn't mean they won't play an important role in your life later on in life. There, I did it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.